Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today we are talking about Gut Health 101, spotting and addressing the early signs of gut dysfunction. So, I'm Alyssa. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a digestive health dietitian and I help people restore balance to their gut so that they can feel their best without unnecessary diet restrictions because nobody wants to avoid their favorite delicious foods long term if they don't have to. And in most cases, they don't. So that's become the focus of my practice is not only getting people feeling better, people who have digestive issues, IBS, SIBO, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, or any other digestive issues, we rebalance the gut microbiome and we calm symptoms, we support digestion so that a prolonged diet is not the long-term solution. Although diet can be a really nice short-term relief while we're working on those underlying issues. But today we're going to talk about 101 because gut health issues don't happen overnight, usually. Um, Often they start with small, subtle signs, things that are easy to dismiss or blame on stress, getting older, or just normal life. But when they're ignored, they can snowball into bigger problems that impact digestion, hormones, and immunity, and even more. So today we're going to cover three main areas. What are the early commonly overlooked symptoms of gut dysfunction? How your gut affects your liver and hormones and overall health, and then actionable steps to start restoring balance in your gut. And let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced what issues you're experiencing, whether it be digestive symptoms, fatigue, skin problems, food sensitivities, and if you want to know how they're connected to your gut health, and we'll talk about it. The first topic is what are the early signs of gut dysfunction? So, one of them is fatigue that does not improve with rest. If you are fatigued and you wake up in the morning after a full night's sleep and you still feel fatigued, this is a big clue that your gut is part of the problem because your gut is responsible for breaking down and absorbing key nutrients, including B vitamins, iron, and magnesium. All of these are important for energy production. So when the gut is inflamed or out of balance, we're not absorbing our nutrients, and that can lead to persistent fatigue. Also, gut dysbiosis, when we have an imbalance of bacteria in our microbiome, in our gut, that can increase inflammation in the body, which can contribute to that constant feeling of sluggishness. And on top of that, health of your gut is closely linked to the mitochondria, which is the energy production powerhouse of the cells. So basically, if your gut is inflamed, it can lead to dysfunction of these mitochondria, which makes it harder for your body to produce energy efficiently. The second sign that your gut may not be working well is anxiety, mood swings, or brain fog. Our gut and our brain is very intimately and closely connected through the gut-brain axis, which is a two-way connection between our digestive system and our central nervous system. So we have like this two-lane highway where the gut communicates with the brain and the brain communicates with the gut. And a disrupted gut can therefore interfere with the production of neurotransmitters. For example, serotonin, most of it, 90% of our serotonin, which is our happy chemical, is produced in the gut. Can you believe that? So actually, it's not produced in the brain, which is what you would assume. And if your good bacteria, and this has to do with the bacteria in our gut. So when our gut bacteria is out of balance, it leads to mood instability because it is affecting serotonin production, and that can lead to anxiety and brain fog. Also, there's dopamine that can be involved and GABA, which also affect mood and our brain function, cognitive function. So, and then beyond that, chronic inflammation from gut issues also can cause inflammation in the brain, which can contribute to difficulty concentrating or difficulty remembering things or just sluggish thinking. Number three, food intolerances that seem to come out of nowhere. So if you're suddenly reacting to foods that never seem to be a problem, a lot of my patients will tell me, well, I just can't believe that I can't eat this anymore because never had a problem with it before. A lot of times, this is a sign that your gut lining is compromised or that your microbiome is out of balance. So, the gut lining acts like a barrier between keeping undigested food particles and toxins out of your bloodstream. So, when this barrier becomes inflamed or weakened, and that's what we mean when we say leaky gut, larger food particles slip through into the bloodstream and it triggers an immune response and therefore inflammation. And that's exactly how food sensitivities develop. Um, Food intolerances, on the other hand, so there's a difference. Food sensitivities are an inflammatory response to food, and they can trigger symptoms around the body because of the circulating inflammation. So it could be headaches, it could be joint pain, it could be skin issues. Food intolerances are due to imbalances in gut bacteria, which can make it harder to break down foods properly and can lead to symptoms like bloating and discomfort and intolerance to foods, especially wheat, dairy, and high FODMAP foods. So those are symptoms usually that will be inside the gut. So think about intolerances are usually gut symptoms, digestive symptoms, and then sensitivities can be digestive symptoms, but usually they're symptoms outside of the digestive tract. So please, if you're thinking about food sensitivity testing for your IBS symptoms, I don't recommend that as a first line. I would highly recommend looking at lactose, wheat avoidance, and reducing your high FODMAP foods in your diet first. So the fourth thing is skin issues. Skin issues like acne, eczema, or rashes. This is a reflection of what's happening inside your gut because we also have a gut skin connection and our skin also has its own microbiome. So this is kind of an emerging area that I'm sure we'll learn much more about the skin, but basically that's a little bit beside the point. The gut, though, when it's inflamed and the bacteria is out of balance, it triggers systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation and that's what shows up as acne, rosacea, eczema from what's going on in your gut. So I mentioned the skin microbiome, but you can have microbiome, an intestinal microbiome that's out of balance that's causing skin issues. And that can also, a gut imbalance can also affect the way your body processes toxins. And if you're not eliminating waste efficiently, so for example, if you're really constipated, you're reabsorbing toxins because your large intestine is so very absorptive that if the stool is one way that we eliminate toxins from our liver. And so if the stool is just sitting there holding the toxins waiting to come out, then it gets reabsorbed and recirculated. And this can push through skin and cause breakouts and irritation. And then also, imbalance of gut bacteria can lead to histamine intolerance, and histamine intolerance can cause skin issues like hives or flushing or skin rashes. I do see that with my patients who have yeast overgrowth, especially, although it can also be the case with my patients who have SIBO, which is a bacterial overgrowth in their small intestine. So that's another way that gut issues can lead to skin issues. And the last thing is frequent colds or immune struggles. 70% of our immune system is in the lining of the digestive tract. It's in that mucus coating. And its job is to be like the military, like the armed forces being a barrier between what's allowed to get into the body and what's not. And so when gut bacteria is out of balance and your immune system is busy fighting that imbalance, there's not a lot of resources left to fight off viruses and things like that. So we can get sick a lot more easily when our gut is out of balance. So when when you're noticing one or more of these symptoms, this is not random. This is telling you that your gut needs attention. But the good news is that the earlier you address it, you can resolve these. And even if it's not early on in the process, maybe you've been suffering for years and you just haven't had any luck figuring out what's going on. These things can be rebalanced using natural solutions. So in the now we're going to talk about how your gut health affects your liver and hormones and the rest of your body. So your liver health is tied with the gut health because your gut and your liver, as I mentioned earlier, work together. So your liver's like a filter, filters toxins and then produces waste. Well, it releases the toxins via bile into the intestinal tract, and then the gut eliminates that waste through bowel movements. But when the gut health is compromised, either from dysbiosis, which is that imbalance in bacteria involving an overgrowth of less favorable bacteria, or constipation and inflammation, the liver has to work harder to process and remove waste. And this extra burden can lead to sluggish liver function, poor detoxification, and increased inflammation in the body. If you think that your liver may be stressed, clues about that might be brain fog, fatigue, skin breakouts, and sensitivity. Although I realize that's a little confusing because these are very general symptoms that can have a multitude of different causes, but it all leads back to gut health. So the next thing that maybe surprisingly is tied in with gut health is your hormone balance. And that's because your gut plays a key role in hormone metabolism, especially when it comes to estrogen. There's a group of bacteria known as the estrobolome, and it helps to regulate estrogen levels by breaking down and eliminating the excess hormones. So, if gut bacteria are out of balance, the estrogen may not be properly metabolized, and that can lead to symptoms like PMS, irregular periods, bloating, mood swings, or even estrogen dominance. Gut health also affects cortisol levels, and cortisol is our stress hormones, and insulin sensitivity, which can affect energy and metabolism and overall hormone balance. So, if you are experiencing persistent fatigue, weight fluctuations, again, skin issues, or heightened PMS or perimenopause symptoms, your gut could be part of that. And then as far as just overall well-being, this is just kind of, as we talked about, mood, our gut affects our mood, our mental health, our immune health, and our energy and metabolism. So, what can we do about this? Well, by supporting good gut health, it does have a positive then domino effect on these other areas. So, by improving digestion and rebalancing the gut microbiome, we then experience a decrease in those related symptoms, but also an increase in energy and improvement in hormone balance as well. So, since this is 101, we're going to kind of go talk about the cornerstones. And so, number one, and this is just this has become an absolute cornerstone of my practice because I found that it's essential. I didn't focus as much on this earlier in my practice, and once I started implementing this, it made the outcome so much better. And that is basically diversity in the diet. And this is especially important because in this gut health space, and even in just kind of a elimination diet space where we're having symptoms, whether they're in the gut or somewhere else in the body, maybe skin symptoms or, joint pain or anything like that, a lot of times food sensitivities are at play. So we find ourselves eliminating foods, and that will calm your symptoms down in the moment. But as I mentioned, there's a reason food sensitivities and food intolerances occur. And so and oftentimes, and that stems with gut and imbalanced microbiome, really, because even so, we talked earlier about how food intolerances lead to symptoms inside the digestive tract. And they're usually sometimes they're a result of enzymatic insufficiency. Very often, though, there's a microbiome component, there's a bacterial imbalance involved. And so that is what leads, though, to the inflammation that causes the intestinal permeability that allows food sensitivities to develop. So remember, the sensitivities is the inflammatory response when a food particle gets through that gut barrier into the bloodstream. There are some other things that can cause that intestinal permeability, but by and far, one of the most common thing is the dysbiosis or gut inflammation from an imbalance of bacteria. We're talking about the solution, though. So the solution to that is diversity in your diet, because the way that we feed, the way that we can combat that imbalance of a gut microbiome, sometimes we have to knock down the overgrown bacteria. And that's what I do with my one-on-one patients. And so this is the case if you're implementing some of the basics and you're just still really struggling, then we do want to test and see, okay, what is out of balance, to what severity, what are the organisms, and where are they in the digestive system? So we do some functional testing to figure that out. And then we do need to knock down that overgrowth, which means kill off the overgrown bacteria using natural methods to do that. But the other part of that, though, and this is something you guys can start with right away, and this is something that I include now with all of my patients as early as we possibly can in the process, is feeding a diverse body of good bacteria. That's ultimately what's going to make your gut resilient, because when we feed a diverse, think about feeding a diverse army that's fighting on your behalf. And by diverse means we have maybe soldiers that have all different trades and skills, so they cannot, so the more diversity we have of different skills that they bring to the table and different functions, the more robust and strong and powerful our microbiome is to protect us and keep us safe. And gut bacteria works exactly the same way. And the way that, and but different bacteria like different foods, and they feed on plant foods. So a diversity of different plant fibers is the best way to build up a diverse and healthy microbiome. And if you have a little dysbiosis, but maybe it's mild, that can often be enough to crowd out the overgrowth. So maybe you do have an elevation of the less favorable organisms that can happen alongside low levels of good bacteria, just because you have opportunity. There's not as many good bacteria, so the bad ones have room to overgrow. But the more good we have, it crowds out the bad. So in mild cases, that may be all you really need to do. And then in more severe cases, which is many people with IBS and SIBO, we have to do a little bit extra and actually use some antimicrobial herbs to kill off the elevation. But alongside that, we still want to build up the diverse microbiome. So this is something you can start with right away. And for those of you who are sensitive, this is like not what you're maybe thinking about, because what you're in the phase of thinking about, what can I avoid? I still need to know what to avoid to feel better. And so that really does take the priority when you are first starting out, if you're really symptomatic. And that's where therapeutic diets like the low FODMAP diet for IBS or SIBO, or a GERD-based diet for acid reflux, or a low histamine diet if you have a lot of histamine-related symptoms. Those therapeutic diets are kind of a first line to calm your symptoms down. But as soon as your symptoms are calmed down, that's when you want to turn your attention toward getting that diversity in. And maybe it's even within still that limited framework. So let's use the IBS and low FODMAP diet as an example. Maybe you're in the elimination phase, you've calmed your symptoms down. Maybe you're still a little hesitant, you haven't moved on to reintroducing those FODMAPs, which you're supposed to do as the second phase. You can still make sure you're getting a diversity of different plant foods within the allowed foods. And what I recommend doing is counting up your foods first and foremost in a week. Count up the different plant foods. So that would be fruits, vegetables, legumes, seeds, nuts, and whole grains. Don't only count them once. So if you eat tomatoes today and you eat tomatoes tomorrow, you only count tomatoes once. But count up how many different plant foods you get in a week, write the number down. And to do this, you have to write down what you eat for a whole week, because otherwise you're not going to remember what you repeated if you just try to keep a tally. So just write down what you eat for a week and then go back and count up the different plant foods. And then you're going to take that number and you're going to gradually build up to 30 per week. So I said it that way because our goal is 30 per week, but you want to know where you're starting from, because you don't want to go from 0 to 60. That would be like asking your muscles to lift way too heavy weight when they're not trained to do that. So we also don't want to overload your microbiome. So if you're at 15 different plant foods per week, maybe go up to 18 and 20 and sit there for a couple weeks, and then build up from there slowly to 30 and give your system time to adjust. If you go too fast, no big deal, but you will get maybe some bloating, discomfort, even pain, cramping. And it's not a big deal in the big picture, but it is for you, because it can feel like a big deal. I know a lot of times it's very disheartening, especially once you felt good, to then trigger symptoms again. So just you want to be careful about not going too fast. Some other things I'll just talk about two other things that you can implement today to start improving your gut health. So the first one was count up your diversity and then gradually build up your diversity, even if you're still on a limited diet and you still have foods you need to avoid. Build up your diversity of plant foods. And remember, it's not just vegetables, it's all those different categories that I just listed. The second thing is supporting the gut brain axis. And that means helping to retrain a resting mode because in our modern world, our nervous systems are just kind of primed to wake up and we just go right into the stressed mode because we our modern lifestyles are stressful. And this can be the case even if, like, let's say you used to have a stressful job and you're retired, your body can still be just that way. You wake up, you go into the stress mode because it's trained to do that. So we want to train relaxation pathways. And this is relevant to gut health because when we're in that stressed mode, it pinches off the signals that the gut sends the digestive tract to digest our food properly, to move food and waste through at the right pace. So, and that's because when we're in a stressed mode, that's supposed to be a very acute short-term situation. We're only supposed to be in that mode to be able to get to safety. So in that situation, our nervous system is sending signaling and blood flow to our extremities away from the digestive tracts. But we're in that state most of the time, and it's not conducive to digestion or even motility or even immune response or lots of things because the brain also is connected to the other internal organs as well through that same vagus nerve. So one way to start retraining the resting mode is through deep diaphragmatic breathing. And I recommend breathing in for 4 seconds, hold, and then breathe out for 8. So the out breath should be twice as long as the in breath. And make sure that you're breathing into your belly. So I actually recommend putting one hand over your chest and one hand over your belly. And you should feel the hand that's on your belly should be going up and down, not the hand that's on your chest. And just do this, start doing this for just a few minutes a day. This will start to train relaxation pathways. And this is important. Remember, if you don't feel like you're currently stressed, and then certainly if you do, know that you kind of are stressed and anxious. And the third thing is to, I would say, be mindful when you eat. The way that we eat, eating slow. So I call this mealtime hygiene. And a few of the things to pay attention to. I would say slow down. One way to do this, slow down so that we chew our food better. So you could even take a few of these diaphragmatic breaths right before you start to eat. That will turn off that stress mode and it'll activate that rest and digest mode. So we have the rest and digest mode, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight mode. So when you take even just a few diaphragmatic breaths, it helps to get you into that rest and digest mode. Then you can make sure you're chewing your food. I recommend 30 to 40 times. So talk about a lifestyle change. That's going to change everything for you. But 30% of digestion actually happens in the mouth. So this is worth implementing, and it will make it, for a lot of people, I notice this helps their symptoms. So slowing down, you will slow down if you're chewing your food 30 to 40 times, and also taking those breaths beforehand helps you to slow down as well. So those would be the 3 things that you can start right away. I do have a download, which is my Healthy Gut Restoration Guide, which summarizes a lot of this information. And I will see you guys next week for our weekly gut check.